Hi guys, I'm Michele. I'm a licensed massage therapist right here in Washington State, and I bring you MBLEx resources both here on YouTube and also on my website, where you can find lots and lots of free resources. I also have some paid courses to help you to tackle that massage and bodywork licensing exam with calm and confidence. Make sure and check out those resources right here in this, right in the in the description and in the pinned comment. You'll have access to that. So there are practice exams, courses, ebooks, all kinds of stuff. Make sure and check that out. Today we are going on to Unit 23 in the Anatomy and Physiology course series. I'm building a course on my website, but I want to make sure that you guys have access to all of this information as soon as possible. So I'm publishing each of these videos as I go through the sequence. So today we're going to be talking about heart anatomy and the conduction system, how the heart beats. All right. So we're going to be talking about the location and the structure of the heart chambers and the great vessels, blood flow through the heart, coronary circulation, cardiac muscle characteristics, and the cardiac conduction system. And then at the very end, we're going to tie everything together with some MBLEx practice questions to help you dial in that information. Make sure to check out my video on cardiovascular pathologies, because I'm not going to be talking about pathologies in this video regarding the circulatory system. So that's going to be there. And then also I have a whole pathologies course that's totally free in the link in the description. So make sure and check that out, because you're going to need to know that information also in order to pass the MBLEx. And in just a second, we'll go ahead and get started with that video. But first, I just want to remind you to subscribe so that you can have access to all of this information ongoing. And then I also want to remind you to like the video so that future massage therapist students can have access to this information. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video.
All right. The heart, your body's central pump. The heart is the powerhouse of the circulatory system, a rhythmic, tireless pump that keeps every cell in the body supplied with oxygen and nutrients while carrying away the waste that tissues can't afford to keep. Understanding how the heart is built, how blood flows through its chambers and valves, and how its electrical conduction system keeps it beating is essential knowledge for massage therapists and body workers. This insight helps you make safe treatment choices for clients with cardiovascular conditions, recognize when symptoms may require referral, and understand how your work can support circulation, healing, and nervous system regulation. There it is. There's the heart. It's located in the mediastinum, which is a pocket of the thoracic cavity. So it's like its own little pocket, and it's slightly to the left of the midline. So when people are putting their hand on their chest to do the Pledge of Allegiance in the United States, they're supposed to be putting their hand on their heart. Okay, so it has 4 chambers inside of it. That's 2 atriums on the top and 2 ventricles on the bottom. I always remember the difference between atriums and ventricles. To be able to keep that in mind is when you walk into a big building that's got a lot of light, there would be a lot of plants, there's going to be some lounge areas. It's like a big office building, and then you're going to like go in the elevator, or it's a hotel or something like that. There's like a big lobby, and that's another name for that is atrium. So that's why they called it that, is because that's where the blood goes in first. It's like it's the lobby for the blood. So remember that. And then the ventricles are the pumps that squish the blood out to go to the next place. It's surrounded by a pocket that's called a pericardium. It's a mucous membrane. It creates like a liquid bubble around the heart, and it anchors it into place. So let's look at, come on now. Sorry, guys. All right. Let's talk about that pericardium for a minute. There are 3 layers of the pericardium. The first layer is the fibrous pericardium. That's the tough outside part that keeps the heart safe. It's made of connective tissue, and it keeps that heart anchored into place by fusing with stuff around it. And it prevents the heart from overstretching and hurting itself like we would hurt one of our skeletal muscles. And so it keeps that, it's a hard pocket that keeps that from happening. It lets it pump, but not too much. And then there's the serous pericardium, which has 2 layers. And we talked about serous membranes in the membrane video. I think it was unit number 5. Go back and check that out if you want to learn more about membranes, if you can't remember. But yeah, there are 2 layers, which has like a liquid in the middle. So the outside layer is the parietal layer, and it lines the inside of that outside layer, which is the fibrous. The parietal layer is the inside layer, and it produces liquid. And so does the visceral layer, the epicardium, which is actually attached to the heart. So they both produce this fluid that reduces the friction with the surrounding tissue when the heart is beating, because it's beating like crazy. Ka-dunk, 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 ka-dunk. So it needs a bubble to keep it safe so it doesn't rub on the tissues all around it. All right, so here's just that slide from the membranes video about an organ being in the middle, and we'll have the visceral layer that's attached to the organ, and then we'll have the parietal layer, which creates a bubble, and then there's epithelial tissue in the center that makes fluid to protect that organ in the middle. Okay, so let's talk about the layers of tissue in the wall of the heart. Now, remember when we were talking about muscle tissue and nervous tissue, and in all of that, we have the layers of the epi and the myo and the endo, or epi and peri and endo, right? Epi is always on the outside. Epicardium. Cardium is referring to the cardio tissue. The myocardium is where the muscle, the cardiac muscle lives. So we've got the outside layer, which is the epicardium, is connective tissue, and it is attached to the pericardium. And so, yeah, then we have the muscle tissue, which is myocardium, and then endo is in the middle. Endo means inside. That's the center lining. It lines the chambers and the valves inside of the heart. So remember, epi means it's so big it's on the outside. Endo means it's on the inside. And that's going to help you keep those straight when it comes to the MBLEx. Make sure and check out the ebook that I have for medical terminology. I have an ebook for medical terminology that will help you to learn all of these terms. Okay, chambers of the heart. So I was talking about atriums, where the blood comes in, ventricles that squirts the blood out. So we have the right atrium gets the deoxygenated blood. And this is something that you're just going to have to memorize. So the SVC would be the superior vena cava, and the IVC is the inferior vena cava. So the veins come in. It's not showing it here in this image, but imagine that there's like a hole right there where the deoxygenated blood comes in to the right atrium, then it gets squished to the right ventricle, and then it gets squished out into the pulmonary tracts to go to the lungs. It goes around, floats around in there, in the pulmonary tracts, in the lungs. It picks up the oxygen that it needs, and then it comes back into the, that would be the pulmonary vein. So this is the pulmonary artery that's taking the blood away from the heart. Ha ha ha. I need to mark that, pulmonary artery. I think I do in a future video, or in a future clip. And then we have the pulmonary vein bringing the oxygenated blood back into the atrium, the left atrium. It gets pushed down into the left ventricle and gets pushed back out into the aorta. It's oxygenated, ready to go take action and go out to the rest of the blood. So that's how it goes. In, out, in, out. All right? So the thickest chamber. It's the biggest one. Why does the left ventricle have to be so big and thick? Because it has to really get that blood cooking, really get it moving fast so that oxygenated blood can get pumped all over the body. You don't need so much energy from the right ventricle because the blood's only going to the lungs, and you don't want to pop your lungs. No. Okay, yes, so here's the diagram of those vessels, okay? So we have the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava that come together, and they bring blood into the right atrium. It goes down to the right ventricle, and it doesn't need to be very big, right? Because it's only going to the lungs, and then it goes up to the pulmonary trunk and divides to the left and the right arteries. Artery meaning blood is going away to the lungs. Then that oxygenated blood comes into the pulmonary vein, into the right pulmonary vein, left pulmonary vein, come together into the left atrium, into the biggest pocket, which is the left ventricle, and boom, they get shot out to, how many pulmonary veins am I going to have, huh? Oh, that's an artery. I was reading it wrong. Okay. Sorry, guys, to confuse you. This is the kind of stuff you need to look out for the MBLEx, reading things wrong, because I do that a lot. That's the main reason I miss problems, is because I'm not reading them right. So make sure you do that. Okay, so oxygenated blood comes out, hits that aortic arch. This is where we have branches that are going up into the cephalic region and out to each of the arms, left and right. And then the descending aorta wraps around the back of the heart and goes down to the lower cavities and the legs. Okay, so valves. These are the valves that are in between the... If you hear that scratching noise, it's because I have a very naughty cat. Knock it off. Okay. So here are the valves. Between each of these atriums and ventricles, we have a valve. And those are called the atrioventricular valves. That's pretty easy, right? Atrium, ventricle, atrioventricular, atrium, ventricle, atrioventricular. And then exiting out of the heart into the pulmonary area, there's a valve. What's that for? It's for keeping the blood from backtracking. So all these valves only flow one way. So the blood can't go backwards. It has to flow in the direction that it needs to go. Okay? And then from the big ol' left ventricle, there is a aortic valve at the base of the aorta. So this is pretty straightforward, right? The pulmonary valve keeps the blood from backtracking back from the heart. The aortic valve keeps the blood from backtracking back from the aorta. So that's straightforward. Now, tricuspid valve is the other name for the atrioventricular valve on the right side. Tricuspid is the right side. There's no other way for you to remember it but to remember it. That the bicuspid is the big one because it's shooting that blood so hard. So it's got two flaps. That's what it means. Tricuspid means three flaps. Bicuspid means two flaps. It's another name for it is, why don't I have it written here? Mitral valve. Okay. The other one is the mitral valve. Bicuspid is also known as mitral valve. I remember this so much because my father, who was born in the early 50s, was born with a dysfunctional bicuspid valve, which really messed things up with his heartbeat, and he had to have surgeries as an infant on that heart to repair it, which was very dangerous at the time. But he made it. He lived a nice long life. Okay, so here is how the blood flows through the heart. So we have the capillaries, which are going to be on the perimeter, and here is where the heart stuff is happening. So I keep talking about how it goes left. Starts out with the deoxygenated blood going from the coronary sinus. That is blood that's supplying the heart. The heart muscle has its own capillaries. So it goes, that blood feeds into the vena cava and the superior and inferior. So it goes right atrium, right atrial valve, atrioventricular valve, right ventricle, pulmonary valve, pulmonary trunk, pulmonary arteries, out to the pulmonary capillaries, which is in your lungs. They get oxygenated, and it goes through the left, all the stuff, up to the ascending aorta, and then it dips down to the lower body, or it goes out, it dips down to the lower body, it goes around to the heart muscle, or it goes up into the upper body. All right, so that's a nice chart. Coronary circulation, so I was just mentioning that the blood has its own blood vessels, because the blood that's going through it, the heart walls are just, the blood's not staying long enough to oxygenate it. So we have the coronary arteries and veins. And there's some other names, but generally they're called the coronary arteries and veins. Often people have problems with their circulation in these arteries, and so they have to have bypasses on those blood vessels. And that sucks, to have a big old surgery on your heart like that. Okay, so let's talk about cardiac muscle tissue. So remember we were talking about the different kinds of tissues. We have muscle tissues. Smooth muscle tissues are inside the blood vessels and in the digestive system. And then we have skeletal muscles, which are what makes us do what we need to do, and we massage those. But then the third one is cardiac muscle, which is a totally different kind. It's involuntary, and it is striated. Striated means that it has sarcomeres. We learned about sarcomeres when we learned about muscle tissue. So those are the contractile bundles where the myosin and actin slide together and apart. So each of the this is how cardiac tissue is different, though, is that each of the sarcomeres is connected by this tissue called an intercalcated disc. What it is it's like a supercharged platform for sending electrical signals. So they have these each of these striates, the light colors would be where the electrical signal gets supercharged through. All right. So gap junctions. So there's like a gap so that the charge can go through really, really fast. Basically what you need to know is gap junctions make action potential from the electrical charge spread faster with the cardiac neurons. Okay, that's all you really need to know. What is action potential? It's a rapid temporary change in the electrical potential across the cell membrane that allows for nerve signal transmission. So faster action potential in the heart because of these gap junctions, where they're the same place as the intercalcated discs. Okay, so it happens faster because of that. That's all you need to know. All right. So as we're getting into talking about how this impulse conduction happens that makes the heart beat, the first thing to know is that only 1% of the cells that live in the heart create the initial charge for the heart to start beating. And we're going to talk about where those live in just a minute. But yeah, they create that intrinsic rhythm of the heartbeat that keeps it going, keeps it going, keeps it going. So they coordinate that timing. It is the natural pacemaker. And those live in this spot right here on the heart, in the left ventricle. In the left atrium. They live in the right atrium. So it creates a cascade of signals that spark each other. It's like there's a signal here, there's a signal here, there's a signal that goes around there. So it starts the spark, which creates a chain, a domino effect of charges all over the heart. So that would be the sinoatrial node, and that's what when people are doing the paddles, when someone has had a heart attack, the heart has stopped beating, it's to get that sinoatrial node working again, to get the charge back up again. Okay, when those are dysfunctional in some way. So keep your heart healthy. So near the superior vena cava on the right atrial wall. So it's just one little bundle of cells that does it. So it fires 100 pulses per minute, and it initiates that atrial contraction. That means the atrium, the right atrium, contracts first. Then the atrioventricular node, which is the second spark. First spark triggers the second spark. It says, oh, hang on a second. Don't let everything else beat yet, because we don't want everything to beat at the same time. When someone has like a heart murmur or something like that, it means that the heart is beating out of sync, because these are not sparking the way that they should. So thank you, atrioventricular node, for keeping things slow for a second, so that each part, each atrium, each ventricle can pump in the right space. So if it is a backup pacemaker if the sinoatrial node fails, but it's a slower one. Okay, so bundle of his. You probably won't need to know that for the MBLEx, but it's just what they call another one. So the atrioventricle bundle is a bundle of fibers that carry that electrical charge down the electrical signal down this space in between the ventricles. What was that called? Septum. There's a septum in between the ventricles. That's an important thing to know, and I think I forgot to mention in the previous slide. Atrium, ventricle, septum in the middle. So the branches, the signal goes, let's see. Oh, okay. So it's not the one. Okay, I'm going to start this over again. Atrioventricle bundle. All right, so something that I did forget to mention is that this tissue between the atriums and the ventricles is called the septum. And that's where that atrioventricle node lives. And it sends a charge to the atrioventricle bundle, which carries impulses to fire in this area, okay? And then the right and left bundle branches go down the septum to carry the impulses down the ventricles. So SA node, sinoatrial, to the atrioventricle node, out the AV bundle, and then down the bundle branches. So it goes zoop, 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 zoop. And then, last thing is the Purkinje fibers. Say that 4 times fast. Purkinje was the last name of a Czech physicist that discovered, I guess, these fibers down here that pick up the signal that are coming down those bundle fibers and shoot the impulses out to the outside of the ventricles to trigger that contraction. So SA node, atrioventricle node, shoop, shoop, out the sides and down to the Purkinje fibers, and those shoot around. And that's how it all works. Can you guys remember all those steps? The Purkinje fibers ensure strong ejection of blood into the aorta and the pulmonary artery. Thank you, Purkinje fibers, for doing what you need to do. Okay, so the cardiac cycle is one full heartbeat. The contraction and relaxation of the atria and the ventricles. Boop, 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 boop. Okay. So, yeah, ensures continuous blood flow, and it's controlled by that conduction system that we just went over. Okay. Systolic and diastolic. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the next video, but it is the contraction phase of the ventricle. So let's go back just a second. All right. Remember this, the ventricle on the right is the big one that squeezes out. That's the systole. Foop. That's the systole. And when you're feeling somebody's pulse and you feel a bump, that's the systole, okay? It's just like, it's a a little bulge in the artery that you can feel as a result of that, the big pump of the big ventricle. That's the big bump of the heartbeat, is that big left ventricle pump, okay? And then when you're looking at a blood pressure reading, the 120, the bigger number, or whatever the number is, the bigger one that's on the top would be the big bump that's pushing the blood into the aorta. The diastole is when the ventricle fills with blood, when that left ventricle fills with blood, okay? So the blood pushes out, that's the systole. When it's filling back up again before it pushes out, that's the diastolic. All right. So it indicates the pressure in the arteries when the heart is resting in between beats. And that's monitored with a pressure cup, and which has a gauge on it to gauge how much pressure is pushing against the cuff. All right, so I'm going to talk more about that in the next video. So how heart rates are regulated. So there are 3 ways that heart rates are regulated. The autonomic nervous system, it can increase heart rate and the force of contraction when you need it because you have to run or because you're under stress. And that's the sympathetic, and then the parasympathetic will slow the heart rate down to support rest and a baseline rhythm. And then hormones like adrenaline and noradrenaline, as well as thyroid hormones, can change the heart rate. And then ion levels, specifically calcium and sodium, will change the heart rate. Calcium increases heart rate. So that's why we need that we need the thyroid hormone, which is calcitonin, to decrease the calcium, which decreases our heart rate. Ooh, that's where your thyroid's important, right? And then, sodium and potassium can increase heart rate. And that's that. Good job, guys, sitting through all that. Good job, me, for reading it. And now let's do some MBLEx style questions to dial in this information and to know what to expect on the MBLEx. Which statement best describes the function of the SA sinoatrial node? What does it do? A, it slows the heart rate by sending signals through the vagus nerve. B, it initiates the electrical impulse that sets the pace of the heartbeat. I like that one. And then we have C, it contracts the ventricles to push blood into the arteries. No, that's something that happens as a result of the electrical impulse. Or D, it prevents the backflow of blood between the chambers. That would be a valve. So I like B. All right. The explanation: the sinoatrial node is the heart's natural pacemaker, generating the initial electrical impulse that spreads through the atria. This impulse sets the resting heart rate and determines cardiac rhythm. The AV node delays conduction, and valves, not the SA node, prevent backflow between chambers. So next question. During the ventricular systole, what is happening in the heart? Remember, systole was the first one, and that's the top number. What is happening? It's a big push, right? The ventricles are relaxed. A, the ventricles are relaxed and filling with blood. That would be diastole. B, atria are contracting to push into the ventricles. That would be the same thing as A. C, ventricles are contracting and pumping blood into the aorta and the pulmonary trunk. Okay, so D, all chambers contract simultaneously to move blood forward. I like C. Okay, ventricular systole refers to the contraction phase of the ventricles. I think it's talking about both the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, which forces blood into the systemic and pulmonary circulations. Ventricular filling during diastole, not systole, and the chambers do not. Okay, ventricular filling occurs during diastole, not systole, and the chambers do not contract at the same time. Atrial contraction always precedes ventricular contraction. Now, when I was talking about the blood in the ventricles pushing out through the aorta, specifically, I was talking about how that pertains to you taking a pulse, so that you know that that's coming from the left ventricle. Next question. What is the primary function of the coronary circulation? Coronary circulation. How is that different than the other two? types of circulation, pulmonary or systemic. A, to deliver oxygenated blood to the lungs. That would be pulmonary. B, to supply the myocardium and with oxygen and nutrients. That makes sense. Myocardium is the muscle fiber of the heart. C, to transport deoxygenated blood back to the liver. I don't think that's a thing. D, to regulate systemic blood pressure. So that would be other functions, homeostatic functions. So the answer would be B, supply the myocardium with oxygen and nutrients. Explanation, the coronary arteries and veins form the heart's own blood supply, delivering oxygen and nutrients to the myocardium, which works constantly and requires a large amount of ATP. So it needs a lot of blood. Blood moving through the heart chambers does not directly nourish the tissue. Coronary circulation is separate from pulmonary and systemic circulation. One more question. Which structure separates the right and left ventricles of the heart? So I talked about this kind of toward the end. It would be the A, interatrial septum. That's the one. And then B, the chordae tendidae. We didn't talk about that. The coronary sulcus. We didn't talk about that. The interventricular septum. Uh-oh. What's the difference? I didn't talk about that one at all. Let's go with the interventricular because it's ventricles. See the question here? Ventricles. So I'm going to go with the ventricular septum. Okay. Let's see the explanation. They said D was the correct because interventricular. So this is how, if you don't know for sure what the answer is going to be, just really look at the question and see if you can get a clue. So explanation, the interventricular septum is the thick muscular wall that divides the right and left ventricles and plays a key role in coordinated contraction. The interatrial septum separates the atria. The coronary sulcus marks the external border between the atria and ventricles. And the chordae tendidae are tendon-like cords that anchor the atrioventricular valve leaflets to the papillary muscles. Woof! Well, we didn't talk about that, but the truth is you guys don't need to know that for the MBLEx. Everything I talked about is what you need to know. So that's it. If you guys got a lot out of this video, make sure and give it a thumbs up so other future massage therapists can have access to this information. And also make sure and subscribe so that you can be in the loop for the next videos. I have a couple more for the cardiovascular system, so stay tuned. And until next time,